On February 4th, 2014, 3 million people live-streamed a sold-out debate between Ken Ham, the founder of the Creation Museum, and Bill Nye, everyone's favorite science guy.
We're seeing people in being indoctrinated to believe that creationists can't be scientists.
Mr. Ham and his followers have this remarkable view of a worldwide flood.
There's a supposed 10 million year gap there, but I don't see a gap.
The question on the table was, is creation a viable model of origins? Meaning, can intelligent, rational people believe the world was created in 6 days? Or has that belief been proven untenable by modern science?
The fundamental thing we disagree on, Mr. Ham, is this nature of what you can prove to yourself.
Now, this isn't a new debate. We've been waging it in full since at least the 1925 Scopes trials, and we've been having it on college campuses, inside of coffee shops, in bars, by academics and laymen alike for years. What made this debate interesting was that two C-grade celebrities with little scientific training and a whole lot of personality were duking it out in front of millions.
And the big thing I want from you, Mr. Ham, is can you come up with something that you can predict? Do you have a creation model that predicts something that will happen in nature?
We build models based upon the Bible, and those models are always subject to change. The fact of Noah's flood is not subject to change. The model of how the flood occurred is subject to change.
Now, when the official debate ended, another one began. Different internet factions declared their champions, supporters fired vitriolic torts back and forth, blogs were written, posts were posted, and internet rage continued until it didn't, and the fad faded and everyone moved on to something else. Now, I have no idea who won the debate. However, Ken Ham later announced that the publicity from the debate spurred on a $73 million fundraiser for his Noah and the Ark-inspired theme park, Ark Encounter, which is sort of like a win. But I do have a good idea who lost the debate. I think we did. And welcome to our very first episode of the People's Theology. My name's Jonny Morrison, and if you can't tell, I'm sick, which is exactly how I wanted to start our very first episode. But today, we'll be exploring the question that Ken Ham and Bill Nye were debating. What is the deal with the Bible's creation narratives? How do we as believers or as skeptics approach those texts and deal with them? What do we make of them? What do they say to us? Do we have to believe that evolution is correct and the texts are wrong? Do we have to believe that evolution is wrong and the texts are right? And is that even, and maybe most importantly, the right way to understand Genesis 1 and 2? Now, you need to understand something. I say that we lost as someone who grew up a diehard 6-day young earth creationist. I took classes in college learning how to scientifically defend a 6-day creation of the world, argued with strangers, and genuinely believed that Darwin was evil. All because I believed that Genesis 1 and 2 necessitated it. When I read the Bible's creation narratives, I saw a struggle between secular evolution and Christian creationism. A battle of worldviews with the authority of Scripture and the viability of my faith quite literally hanging in the balance. Now, it was a weird way to live, because nearly every time I turned on my local NPR station, which I did listen to even in that stage of my life, or flipped through a National Geographic in a waiting room, I was reminded that my understanding of the world's origin stood in opposition to modern scientific thinking. At the time, it didn't really bother me, but it did make me feel a bit defensive. Like I never knew when I was going to argue with a friend or race through my best creationist arguments when an article or radio program presented a new piece of evidence for evolution. Now, that was okay, but the worst side effect of all was that I had become so accustomed to reading the creation narratives in a defensive posture that I stopped approaching them like anything more than a creationist textbook. I saw them through the lens of my favorite YouTube debates and read into them the struggle I was witnessing all around. I was using Genesis to make a point. And the consequence is that I stopped listening to what Genesis was trying to say. But the thing is I was missing something. And what I was missing was really important. This is why I say that we lost the debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye. At the end of the day, it didn't show us that the Bible could be trusted or that creationism is a viable model of cosmology. It didn't prove anything. Instead, it conflated an already inflated view of Genesis that tends to distract us. It fueled the fire of our debates and arguments and ebbed out something that we needed to hear. And again, the real problem is that the thing we needed to hear is really important. Now, to help us think through these issues, we'll be interviewing Dr. Tim Mackie, who is, well...
My name's Tim Mackie, and I live in Portland, Oregon, and I've served as a pastor at Door of Hope Church in Portland, and a professor of biblical studies at Western Seminary, and then a friend and I started a nonprofit media studio a couple years ago called the Bible Project.
Now, one of the things I love about Tim is that he is not the kind of person you expect him to be. I don't know what you expect about a person who is a professor, but it's probably not Tim. He's a skateboarder from Portland who just happens to have more degrees in Hebrew and Bible than I can count. But I was fortunate enough that during my seminary degree, I was able to take a class from Tim, and it was one of the best classes I ever took. He was able to unpack the Bible narratively and in its context and all of its complexity and all of the interesting questions that come with it and all of the weirdness that comes with it and deal with it unashamedly, but also present it in a way that is beautiful, compelling, and amazing. So, Tim, maybe what would be helpful is just for you to start off in explaining who you are and why you are the way that you are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I need to compress my story a little bit because it just kind of fits in. So my parents are Christians, and I grew up around church-ish. I don't know why I developed an aversion towards churchianity growing up, but I think I had an early introduction into skateboarding and skateboard culture that just I loved and embraced every part of that. And so that's not a very friendly environment towards anything organized religion. And so I think that probably fed a lot of my rebellion against Christianity. But there was an outreach ministry to skateboarders in Portland called Skate Church that has a skate park open different nights a week. And anyhow, so it was through getting to know people in that ministry. So I became a follower of Jesus when I was about to turn 20.
Okay.
And I'm, aside from a proverb and a story about Noah, I mean, I don't know anything. I just have heard stories about Jesus and I was compelled by him. So I'm reading the Bible for the first time in my 20s, and it's just, I'm both disturbed and fascinated. And I've come to see that that kind of history as a real advantage, that I don't have this baggage or this over familiarity that I had to unlearn anything. It was all new territory for me.
And as Tim kept studying, what he found is that he loved this new territory. So much so, he just kept pursuing it.
Took Greek, took Hebrew, did a master's, did another master's, did a PhD in Jewish studies. I ate it up, and I've loved every minute of it.
Now, Tim's view of the Bible is helpful, but it's not helpful because it's mystical or because it's supernatural, but because it is uniquely grounded in the messiness and reality of life. That
wedding, of divine and human. And so to me, it just makes the Bible this a lifetime's worth of discovery of a cross-cultural experience and being open to things that are surprising, and being ready to surrender, like what I thought I knew, not that you don't know anything or that you don't have any convictions, but always be ready to have exposed ways that I've just assumed that I understood this or that part of the Bible, and really I haven't had a clue. And
so according to Tim, the first thing that we have to do in order to understand Genesis 1 and 2, and really all of the Bible generally, is first and foremost get into the context of the story that's being told. Insert ourselves into the world of the original audience.
If I'm an American and I go to Paris, a responsible traveler will do something to orient themselves to like the culture, geography, take a phrase book with you, learn some phrases. Mm-hmm. You don't get off the airplane and look for the McDonald's, or, that's just bad etiquette. And that's because it's a different culture.
Yeah.
And the constant hang up I think modern readers have with the Bible is we either are over familiar with the Bible, and so we just assume that what it means in English on the first pass reading to me is its obvious meaning.
Yeah.
And you just have to learn to check that assumption at the door and become a student. And not in a weird way to trap the Bible in the hands of scholars, but just in a way to humble ourselves and expect to hear something new. So when it comes to Genesis, the first chapters of Genesis, the modern Western imagination is imprisoned by the debates, the cultural war of creation, evolution, and that whole, and it shapes us to read these texts in such an unhelpful way, in a way that actually prevents us from. It makes us impose onto the first pages of the Bible an agenda and questions that the author's not trying to address. And at the same time, therefore, we miss what it is the author is trying to address within their original context.
The question is, what is the context of Genesis 1 and 2? See, our context today, it makes sense that we read Genesis 1 and 2 to be about the physical creation of the universe, because our world revolves around questions of physical origins. Darwinianism is about physical origins, so why would Genesis 1 and 2 not be that way? But if we can go 3,000 to 4,000 years backwards, what we find is they just thought about the universe differently. And therefore, their context is different, and therefore their questions are different.
So the fancy name for that in theological dialogue is called concordism or concordist view. Concord just meaning full overlap or agreement. So concordism means what the word earth means in English is what it means on page 1 of the Bible. What light means in modern English. And so what I'm looking for is complete concord, complete overlap between the apparent meaning in English and what those words mean in some kind of scientific account of the origins of the universe today.
Yeah.
And so it's just, you have to check that and you say, well, that's not actually how language works.
Yeah.
And that's, we assume that when we go to Paris, we assume that I don't know the language and they don't speak English. But when we pick up the Bible, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And the instinct for that is a good one, namely that the Bible is a word addressed to God's people and speaks on a personal level. That's the right instinct. But I think we get there by the wrong means.
There's a gap between our reading and understanding of creation narratives. When we read Genesis 1, we see specific images, and certain things come to mind, and they influence the way we interpret it. So we hear something like God created the heavens and the earth, and imagine something like a big bang, where all of a sudden the cosmos and everything in it erupts into being. But there's a problem with that interpretation. Big Bang, something out of nothing creation, is a modern concept. The ancient Hebrews, reading and writing this, couldn't imagine a singularity. Nothing like that. No one did. Until the first spiral nebula was measured in 1912. So reading a singularity into Genesis 1 is taking a modern concept of the universe and forcing it into an ancient worldview. It doesn't belong, and it cannot fit.
The other piece is, what is the Bible for? Especially when it comes to pages 1 and 2 and the debates about. If I assume what the Bible is for is to give me an account in my modern terms about the physical material processes and timeline of the origins of the universe, then if I think it's God's word, then it has to do that in a way that matches some account that I have of those processes.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's in error, or it's incorrect. But underneath that is an assumption that the purpose of the Bible is to do that. And when you turn to the few places in the Bible that talk about what the purpose of the Bible is, Psalm 1, Psalm 119, 2 Timothy chapter 3, what they highlight is the purpose of the Bible is to invite God's people into a view of ourselves and who God is and the meaning of history that all leads to the Messiah, Jesus. And the purpose is, as Paul says, to make us wise for the incredible salvation brought about through the Messiah, Jesus. And so if that's the purpose of the Bible, then to me it raises the question, like maybe looking for some kind of account like that of the universe's physical origins, and maybe looking for that in the Bible is actually just a dead end.
Yeah.
That's not what it's for. And I know that's a controversial thing to say, but to me, it's an obvious implication of when you read Paul's words. And so it raises the question, what is Genesis 1 and 2 for? And I think primarily what the author's trying to get at is describing the kind of world, the meaning of the world you and I inhabit, who's responsible for it, and what's the real problem, and where is this thing going? Who's behind this? Why are we here? What's the problem? What's the solution? If you pay attention to the text, those are the questions that the author's trying to get at. Isn't just the first sentences of the Bible. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right away, you're faced with an issue. I've done this many times with a room of people. As I have people close their eyes and they read the first few sentences of Genesis 1, and I ask people, tell me the picture being painted as I read the words.
Yeah.
And inevitably, it involves a sphere of some kind floating.
A picture of Earth.
Yeah, totally. And that's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
Because the meaning of the English word, earth, is the globe. It also has a secondary meaning of dirt, like soil. But that's not the way we use the English word earth. We mean globe. And so right away, you have to ask, okay, now just stop. How long have humans had a visual image of the globe? And we're only talking like 60 years for the first satellite photos.
To be exact, the first photos of the Earth were taken in the 1940s. But the most famous photos of the Earth came from the crew of the Apollo 17 in 1972.
So we have a completely different view of the structure of the physical universe by this author that's at least writing from some 3,000 years ago.
Now, this is also true for the word heavens in Genesis 1, verse 1. See, when we read that, we want to add modern nuances. So we might be tempted to think about cosmos, galaxies, and supernovas. But that's not what a pre-Copernicus, pre-Galileo people are imagining. In fact, they can't imagine that. For them, heavens means what's up there. That big blue thing above us that we call sky.
I think an honest reading of Genesis 1 in its vision, in its context, gives us an ancient Israelite vision of the construction of the world. And that's what is being designed on page 1 of the Bible. And so I think if you're just honest with that, it just raises the question then, okay, well, either the purpose of the Bible is to tell me about the physical structure and origins of the universe, and the Bible is wrong. That's one route to go. That would be, a whole bunch of people, Or the other one would be a very small circle of people who would be the Christian flat earth sect.
Oh, interesting.
People are out there. Or would be another way to interpret, which would say it's honoring the literal meaning of the text, but actually it's not. It's totally translated the meaning of these words into modern meanings of create, meaning to bring into physical existence out of non-existence. And that's not primarily what the word create means in Hebrew. And that what's being created is our universe as we envision it. And that's clearly not what's happening.
Yeah.
So the irony of even the young earth view or the old earth view is they say they're embracing a plain sense meaning of the text, but that's actually not. That's actually not the case.
The stories of Genesis 1 and 2 are written from the perspective of an ancient person. They are visions of the world the way they saw it. The way they saw it when they walked out their front door and tried to make sense of things without the help of modern technologies. So continue reading the story, and you will continue to find expressions of ancient perspectives. That doesn't mean Genesis 1 is wrong. It means it has a context, just like we do. Ancient Hebrews, like all ancient peoples, believed certain things about the world and the universe. And the truth is, at no point does God decide to update their cosmology. So, what does this mean for us? Well, it means that Genesis 1 is not out to satisfy modern scientific curiosities. It's not there to answer Bill Nye's questions or even to defend Ken Ham's premises, because those things don't exist yet. If we want to get at the heart of Genesis 1 and 2, we have to insert ourselves into the context of Genesis 1 and realize the Bible, though for us, was not written to us. And it means that we need to hold our modern questions in suspension and allow the author and the story to do its work in our lives. We need to do what all good readers do. We need to read the story. Scholar N.T. Wright refers to this kind of reading as reading the Bible through a hermeneutic of love, which is a fancy way of saying that we need to look at the Bible through lenses of love. Wright says, quote, "In love, the lover affirms the reality of otherness in the beloved. Love does not seek to collapse the beloved into terms of itself. And so when applied to reading text, this means that the text can be listened to on its own terms without ever being reduced to the scale of what the reader can or cannot understand at that moment." End quote. So as readers, we have to allow the text to be what it is. We can't try and force it into our world or make it answer our questions. That's not what love does. Love seeks to understand the other where he or she, or in this case, it is. Instead of changing the text, we change so we can read and understand it the way it was meant to be read.
Go back to what do the prophets and the apostles say the purpose of the Bible is. It's to make us wise about the salvation that God's accomplished through the Messiah of Israel, Jesus of Nazareth. And when you're talking on that level, let's talk about Genesis 1 and 2 then.
With the help of Tim Mackie, we have answered our first big question, which is simply, how do you read, how do you engage with the creation narratives of Genesis 1 and 2? But there's still a lot of questions to answer. Specifically, the one that Tim posed right there at the end, which is, what does Genesis 1 and 2 say about salvation? Now, to answer that question, we'll continue talking to Dr. Tim Mackie. And in our next episode, we'll take a deep dive into some weird and unexpected places. So subscribe and check back soon for our next episode. And if you enjoyed our very first episode of The People's Theology, there's a few things that you could do that would be helpful. One, rate us on iTunes. It weirdly helps. But two, and more importantly, would you share this episode with someone else that you think might enjoy it? Maybe they have the same questions that we did. Maybe they have a different understanding of the narratives and they would like to put their voice into the conversation. Whatever it is, share it with somebody else. People's Theology is brought to you by Missio Dei Community Church in Salt Lake City, Utah. For more information about the church, check out our website at missiodeislc.com. Thanks.